Welcome to season 6 of the Retail Tea Break podcast. My name is Melissa Moore, the Retail Advisor and Rethink Retail's top retail expert for 2024. Each week, I'll be joined by industry experts, retailers and brands to dispel the myths, share knowledge and give you an insight into the retail industry. You can listen back to previous Retail Tea Break podcast episodes on your favourite podcast platform or, of course, on YouTube. And while you're there, please do subscribe to the podcast so that you get to listen to it first every week. So in the meantime, grab that cup of tea, sit back and listen in to season 6 of the Retail Tea Break podcast. Today, I'm joined by a guest who is a serial creative entrepreneur, having spent most of her career as a leading Irish fashion designer. Throughout this successful career, she's been an advisor, a trainer, and a mentor to many SMEs and creative individuals, working with several local enterprise offices, universities, and organizations. Her expertise includes fashion design, business management, design thinking, sustainability for creative businesses, digital entrepreneurship, and product development. And she's incredibly passionate about sustainability, slow fashion, and heritage crafts. Aideen Bodkin, founder of StylAi, welcome to the Retail Tea Break podcast.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm delighted to be here.
I am thrilled to have you on today. I think it's going to give a very different perspective to this idea or this journey that most of us are on when it comes to fashion and garments and apparel and sustainability and returns and everything else kind of in that kind of arena right now, which we know is at the forefront of not only retailers' minds, but of course consumers as well. But look, before we get into it, in the age-old fashion of the Retail Tea Break podcast, in the time that it takes to boil a kettle, which I'm told is about 2 minutes, tell us a little bit more about you and your background in the industry.
Okay, so my love for design started very young. I went to NCAD and I studied fashion and came out and worked for a few other brands. But about 24 years ago, I started my first company. So it was my synonymous brand, Aideen Bodkin. And in the very beginning, I was designing smart daywear, beautiful linen pieces, suiting. And then over time, the market changed. So the demands in the marketplace changed and people were looking for things a little bit dressier. So that brand morphed into being one of the better known brands for occasion wear. So I loved doing it. My background, which I was really strong at, is I love tailoring. I loved getting the fit right. To me, it was almost like jigsaw puzzles and I loved every bit of it. Then in 2016, I got the contract to design a uniform for CityJet, which was really fabulous. It was something a little bit different. I was working kind of within restrictions, to a uniform rather than doing something that the creative process was me start to finish. I was working with the corporate, but I loved every single bit of it. Around 2012, I decided to go back to education and I got my master's in visual arts education. And then 2020, the world stood still and I had been in business for a long, long time, but I was one of these people caught in a perfect storm because on one side I had a brand that was designing clothes for occasions and nobody was going to any occasions. And on the other side, I had a brand that was doing uniforms for an airline and every airline was grounded. So it made me think, what's next? Like, what are you going to do? And at the same time, I've been really passionate, as you mentioned earlier on, about sustainability. And I saw an opportunity maybe to take a little bit of a break and to reset and to have a look and see, was there something I could do with my brand in this space? So I ended up going back to UCD and I studied design thinking for sustainability for full-time for a year. And following that, I went on to TU Dublin and I studied digital entrepreneurship because I wanted to get a little bit more familiar with technology. So throughout this time, my brand had been slow fashion. People bought it, loved it, and kept it. And I was delighted with that. But at the back of my mind, there was this niggling thing because I saw the rise and rise and rise of fast fashion and I wasn't happy with it for many different reasons. The biggest one being ethical. I couldn't understand how people were buying products that cheap and feeling maybe that people were paid properly for it. Like the penny wasn't dropping there for me. I couldn't understand it. And secondly, when I saw the amount of waste and what was happening to the planet, And the fact that, you know, everybody was kind of waiting to the point where it's pushing you over the edge before they realized how far it had gone. So I decided that I was going to try and do something about it and to look at online sales, which is where the market has gone now. And about a year and a half ago, or a year ago maybe, I decided that I was going to take another step back into startup, and I was going to try and develop a new idea that would help with online returns. So that's me today. 2 minutes, kettles off.
Wow, goodness. And of course, I, like many, would know the brand Aideen Bodkin, would know and adore. And I can, even in my head, I can see some of those incredible dresses that you created and some of the outfits. But to have almost come, not quite full circle, but to have almost come to the other side of things now to help and support retailers with their fit. And again, it's back to this fit and consumers, which is exactly what you were known for. But it's incredible then to have someone with your insight, because you know that back end of the industry that consumers don't see, whether it is the design, the manufacturing, the people that make these garments, you know, that whole logistical pipeline. To bring all that together is unbelievable. But you mentioned online there, and I know for you certainly, and certainly the customers I remember that were buying your goods, they wanted to try it on, they wanted to touch and feel those incredible fabrics, they needed to feel the fit of the garments on them because again it's what you're known for. How does that translate online or even generally for fashion? I'm not always sure, and again I'm going to get told off for saying this, I'm not always sure fashion for every shape and size for every garment works online. What's your take on that?
Well, I think there's a long tradition with fashion being sold not in bricks and mortar shops. So if you think back, Melissa, to catalogs, they were a way
Yeah.
that, you know, in the past, or magazines, fashion magazines were the go-to many, many years ago, where people didn't have access possibly to shops with fashion. So it's always been something there. But I think since 2020 in particular, it's been a really big opportunity for retailers because I think the public is much more used to accessing all information digitally. Now, I agree with you about the touch and feel. That's something that doesn't translate as well to online as it does, you know, when you're in a shop. But it is the future. I mean, the research that I have been doing, and particularly looking at growth areas in retail, online is one of the biggest growth areas. And, you know, there's always going to be a need for bricks and mortar. There's no doubt about that. And particularly for products that take a little bit more time and energy and effort and like personal touch in selling. So I would imagine that occasion wear will actually probably stay in that category. But online does work very well. I think there's probably a slight mismatch between the information that you're getting in an online space and that which you would get from an assistant in a store, because I think it's reactionary in a store that there's somebody there who can answer you in real time, whereas online you're slightly left to your own devices. It's a little bit more guesswork, but that's not saying it doesn't work. It does actually work for the majority, but I agree with you, there's certain ones that it won't ever, you know, really replace the bricks and mortar.
It sounds like in that respect, bricks and mortar is safe, as we all know, even after kind of that March 2020. Gosh, you brought me right back today talking about that and how it impacted the industry. But it's interesting to see that, look, as with the rest of the industry, there's an agility there. We can find ways to do things for the right reason, not only for the designer or the fashion brand, but of course for the consumer to ensure that they're buying the right goods, you know, that they need and that they're using them, I
Yeah.
suppose. So your research, you've done an awful lot over the last few years with the various courses you've done. And I suppose again, it's been centered around this idea of fashion and retail as such. What did your research tell you that the key issues are for consumers when it comes to buying fashion specifically, I suppose, online?
Okay, so like we have primary and secondary research. So basically, with primary research, we spoke to people ourselves or contacted them. And we sent out a survey. We had 128 respondents, so it's quite a big sample. And we were asking them in particular what they found difficult about shopping online. Overwhelmingly, it was size. It was
Yeah.
confusion. It was the fact that even buying the same size in different brands, they were getting different fits. talking about then the same brand would have different fits depending on the garment. So, you know, it's hard enough to navigate when you're on the floor of a shop and you're looking at the garments, have the opportunity to go to a dressing room. But when you're spending money and you're, you know, spending money on postage and deliveries, and you're ordering what you think is your size, maybe 2 or 3 garments, and realize that maybe only one of them fits you, there's a problem there. So size was a major problem. The second thing was, and it's slightly fickle about the fashion industry, when it comes to advertising, there, most of what people would see in terms of imagery are these, you know, models who are like 5'11" and size 6, and they don't represent real people. Now, a lot of brands are doing something about that, and they are addressing it, and they're putting a lot more effort into it. But the majority of brands are spending quite a bit of money on advertising, and they want the association to be with these perfect people. And something that came up in our research was that that's not necessarily what the shopper wants to see when they're trying to understand digitally whether something is actually going to work on them physically. So one thing was, could they not see a little bit more of imagery that reflected their body type? So that was the second part. 53%, this is a really high figure, of all cited reasons for online return are due to incorrect size or bad fit and unsuitability. Unsuitability covers quite a lot of terms. It could mean that when the garment arrived, it was unsuitable because maybe it was a different color to what they thought. But 9 out of 10 times, unsuitability meant that when they brought the garment home, having seen it on one of these fabulous creatures that don't really exist, that when they tried it on themselves, that it just didn't work. It wasn't the right look on them. And that again goes back to the idea that if they were able to judge it on a body type like their own, they'd be a little bit more assured when they were purchasing. So 53% is a really high percentage. And then the other thing that's very alarming in that whole piece, Melissa, is that 10% of all returns go directly to landfill. And that's the talk. You know, that is the part, because for some brands, and I am going to call out fast fashion again because they're known for it, it's actually cheaper for them, and they have written it into their margins, to allow customers keep the product or just literally get rid of the product, and they will give them back credit for the product they've purchased. That's not sustainable. That's just complete waste, and it's a disregard on two parts: ethically for the people who've actually made the garments, like somebody has sat down and made that garment that somebody else just sees no value in, just let the customer have it. And then also environmentally, because a lot of these garments are ending up going to countries such as Ghana. And in Ghana at the moment, 15 million pieces of fashion arrive in their port every single week. They're unwanted garments. So they're the figures that we're dealing with. It is that shocking, and it's on that scale.
So much to kind of unpack there, and I'm definitely going, because we can't skip over that figure or this return. So I'm going to come back to that in a sec. When it comes to your research, and I'm nodding away here, and I know people at home won't be able to see this, but I'm nodding away like a nodding dog here. You know, sizing, tick, major issue with representation. Shocking in this day and age. It doesn't matter what size you are, it doesn't matter how you wear whatever. There is definitely, as you said, there's almost one size fits all when it comes to online shopping. Some brands slowly are really trying to meet their needs of their consumer and are really listening, and I love that. Need more of that. But of course, that will it suit me? Do you know what I mean? It's an obvious one. If you know your customer well, like, surely that's something you should be trying to understand. And of course, we all live in a different way, move in a different way, will wear a garment in a very different way, or for very different needs, even if we're buying occasion wear or we're buying leisure wear. I think it's fascinating that your research has been incredibly accurate, but B, it just feels like the industry kind of doesn't care. Like, we're in 2024. Why has nothing been done? From your perspective, why has nothing been done sooner about some of these? Because this isn't new, any of this.
I think partially what's happened is it's consumer sentiment now that's pushing a drive towards sustainability rather than the other way around. And there's a little bit of catch up being done. Now, having said that, I, over the last 10 years, have noticed an enormous amount, particularly of Irish retailers, who were very fast to get involved in sustainability. They were looking at their packaging, they have been looking at their in-store presence, they've been looking at a lot of different things associated with sustainability. And in particular, which is really good to see, they're looking at brands that are aligning themselves with sustainability. So it's not as though the retailers haven't done a lot about it, but there's when it's the two reasons I was mentioning, sizing and unsuitability. Sizing is a fundamental thing, Melissa, because what is seen as a size, say 10, we just take that as a standard
Mm.
because it's what a lot of designers would work in as a base size. So a UK size 10. There's about 4 different variations across Europe of that with a different number on it. So it's starting off with the confusion there for the consumer because they don't really know, well, what is a size 10 in Danish sizes versus
Mm.
Scottish sizes? Then you've got cultural differences affecting brand fit. And on top of that, something that's designed for a standard size 10, if the designer is working on something maybe for a standard person who they consider maybe 5'5", 5'6", well, that's going to have a different fit on somebody who's 5'10" and a different fit on somebody who's 5'1". But they're all fitting within this, one bracket. And it's a really, really hard thing to navigate. Then when it comes to the suitability piece, retailers, they're trying because there's quite a bit out there now online where there's avatars where people can try things on avatars, or there's virtual dressing rooms on retailers' website, but it doesn't have the same feeling that somebody has. And it is to do with the motion, and it is to do with a feeling. When you're in a shop and you're trying something on, you have the ability to kind of judge. Whereas what's happening online is that the ability to judge has been removed. It's replaced by a little bit of guesswork. And in a sense, the retailers are doing the best with what they have because the brands are giving them images and they're working from those images, but the images are editorial and they're done to talk more about the brand and the brand ethos and the brand idea rather than who the end wearer is. So there's, again, a little bit of a disconnect there. I've seen some Irish retailers doing a fabulous job because they'll have stylists coming in store and they'll do a day where somebody is showing how the garments can be worn, and then they'll post that up online, which is really great because consumers are getting to see it a little bit more. And some of the influencers out there have gone down the route of this try on Tuesday or try on Friday, where they actually try the garments on so that the person can see. So all of this is really helping the consumer. But the biggest issue is really happening when consumers are on a website and the garments that they're looking at are imports, because that is a big problem. We're talking about air freight. We're talking about courier deliveries. We're talking about a huge carbon footprint on something like that versus if they were working with Irish retailers where there's a bricks and mortar presence and, it's a local business. It's sustaining, communities. It is getting people to go and support local businesses, but it's also a much lowered carbon footprint. So it's something that we actually have to start thinking about, that in some instances, global is not better than local, and particularly when it comes to sustainability, local is the better choice if at all possible.
Absolutely. And I suppose that then ties back to what you mentioned a few minutes ago, returns. So if we are buying clothing or footwear or whatever it might be right now, because you said the sizing's quite off, the fit might not be right. So we've bought half a dozen dresses if we have a wedding coming up or whatever it might be. We almost think we're doing the right thing because then we think we're going to, right, we buy 5, we're going to send 4 back. That return, as you said, comes at an enormous cost. And again, I'm not really sure consumers out there understand the
Yeah.
value. It isn't just the value of the goods, as you've said there. Those goods could end up in a completely different country, as you said, being dumped. They could be incinerated. They could go to landfill here. Or, of course, we've got just the sheer cost of you sending that back to the retailer, which, again, consumer has every right to do. But then the cost internally of those goods going back to stock, being repackaged, so therefore more packaging, the physical transportation of those returns, it almost feels like a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
From your perspective, again, whether it's the consumer on this or whether it's the retailer, what do we do when it comes to returns? Because it definitely can't continue. I mean, you've said that there. The impact on the planet is just disgraceful. It's not even shocking anymore. It has to stop. But it feels like neither side, whether it's the shopper here or it's the retailer, it's almost like no one's budging. It's everyone feels they're doing the right thing, but actually what we are doing right now, it can't continue.
Yeah, you're right. And actually, there's something in there. So I came across these two terms, and you might be familiar with them, Melissa, but I don't know whether everybody listening to this will be familiar. So there's a term which is known as size sampling. And what that is a behavior where a consumer will, because of sizing issues, now let's be honest, that's why they're doing it. They'll go onto a brand website or a retailer's website and they'll buy the same garment in 3 different sizes to try
Yeah,
and get one that fits. Now, in fairness to them, they're doing that because they're unsure of how the sizing works in that particular brand. And in their mind, they're thinking, well, I'm going to keep one anyway. So the retailer has made a sale. And if I get the 3, it's in one parcel and I can return it. The issue is it's the returns piece because it's unnecessary. If it was possible to get the sizing right the first time, there wouldn't be a need to return the garments. So that's part one. On the other side, and I understand why it's being done. And I think, again, we're talking about something that started in COVID, but it stayed with us. Retailers all of a sudden were faced with this whole vacuum. They had no customers, nobody was going anywhere. They had stock that they had on order arriving into their shops. And it was a terrible time because they were able to cancel some of it, Melissa, but they weren't able to cancel all.
mm,
So they're sitting looking at the stock and they're saying to themselves, this is my money tied up in this stock and I have to do something about selling it. So an awful lot of people immediately went to their social media sites and they started to market things online. And one of the things that everybody, almost everybody did was offered free deliveries.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and therein lies the problem because with those free deliveries, the consumer understood, well, it's not costing me anything on getting the product here. I might have to pay like what, €10 to get the product back. It's not that big a deal. If I was to go into the city centre and pay parking, it would cost me more than that. So we all understand every single part of this. But what's happened now is the retailer at the other end has sent 3 garments out. They're getting 2 back. As you said, it comes back into the shop. They have to reprocess it. It's wasted packaging. It's wasted time sending the garments out and money. And then they have to put it back on the floor. But added to this is the problem that if the garments have been off the floor for any length of time, the likelihood is by the time they come back, they're going to have to discount
Yeah.
those garments. And they might have lost sales in the meantime. So it's a catch-22 situation for the retailer. They feel that they have to send the garments out to keep the customers happy. The customers have to buy 3 garments to get the one that fits. And then we're talking about the inevitable returns. And it just is simply a case that something has to be tightened up there to make it much more exact when people are looking to buy garments online. Something has to happen, and that will help both retailers and the consumers in the long run, and the planet, let's say.
Absolutely, and as you said, it's needed and it's timely. Like this, we can't keep kicking this down the road. And whether it's a matter of charging for returns or educating our customers, and I always say that with great care because not to patronize them, but again, we need to be more transparent about what's happening within the industry, even though it is ugly right now to turn around and say there are brands incinerating goods, polluting our waters with these things as well. It's or of course, if you said just shipping them off elsewhere to let someone else deal with the problem, it's not ideal. But with everything in retail right now, and we were talking before we started recording here about AI and its uses, do you think there could be an answer in technology? You've obviously gone back, you've upskilled and you've re-educated yourself in this kind of digital world that we're now very much a part of. So do you think that retail and digital could provide a solution here, or at least bring us some way into supporting both the retailer and the consumer to find a better solution?
Yeah, because I think it has to be some sort of a digital solution. That's how people are getting their information, as I said at the start. So even if it's a case that a consumer is doing online research on a brand, and there's, there's a lot of consumers who would do their research online first and then go into a
Mm.
store to purchase the product, because it kind of slows or speeds up the process of them finding the exact right thing. They know what they're looking for. It's a much more exact trip then to the store to be able to buy the product. So there has to be a way in terms of translating that to online sales so that retailers have the opportunity to open up their store and their store's offerings and their brands to a wider public. Because a lot of the time, if a retailer, for example, in Ireland, we know what it's like. If a retailer is in a rural setting, they probably have generally a local clientele. But online sales opens up the entire island to that same retailer, because they might have a brand that somebody, if they're based, say, up in Donegal, that somebody in Cork is looking for. And if it is a case that there's some sort of way that AI and digital can actually close the gap between the customer's expectations and the product working for them when it arrives, then it's a really good space to be in. And I think there is. I mean, it's something that I'm looking at the moment with the startup that I'm involved in. We're looking at a digital solution that will help retailers enable customers to buy much more accurately first time round, so that it reduces the need for online returns.
And I actually think that's the retailer doing their job. Much like when we talk about physical retail and that need for experiential retail and really well trained and knowledgeable people, colleagues on the shop floor, it sounds like actually this is really needed for online, to enable both the retailer to sell the right product, but also for that shopper to just have the perfect purchase, to buy once, to keep the goods, and I suppose to be truly happy with the brand. So it brings me to my final question, because I'm really excited to dig a bit more into this. Tell us what's coming up for you, I suppose, over the next while, and tell us a little bit more about this new idea, this new brand for you at StylAi.
Yeah. So I was saying to you earlier on, Melissa, I had gone back. My last foray into upskilling was with TU Dublin. And when I was there, I heard about a course called New Frontiers, which is run in the TUs, but it's backed by Enterprise Ireland. And it's a fantastic course for startups. They select a certain amount of businesses in lots of different regions across Ireland, and they help them with this accelerator program. So it's a really focused program that helps you with all aspects: market sizing, getting your empathy research, having your value proposition, all of these type of business terms. But basically what it does is it gets you to focus in on what's the problem, who has the problem, and what can you offer that will help to solve this problem. So when I went in, I had this idea that I wanted to do something to help with online returns. And my focus was on how do you focus in on the main causes of online returns, being the 53% I talked to you about earlier on.
Mm.
So I am working on a digital solution it's a software piece for retailers that they will be able to put on their website that helps consumers to be matched to the perfect garment that will suit them size wise and will suit their body type. So that's the area I'm working in at the moment. I'm in at product build stage. So I am going to be finished this course actually on the 13th of March, and I've enjoyed every piece of it. It's been just fantastic. Anybody out there who's thinking of starting up a business and they feel like they need some help, apply for the New Frontiers program. I couldn't recommend it strongly enough. So on the 13th, I'm on my own. It's done then and dusted, and I will have a beginnings of a product that I'd be able to talk to retailers about. But the next step for me, and I'm delighted about this one, I will be going to the Kilkenny shop in Nassau Street on the 16th, I think, and the 30th of March. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll have it on my own website. And I will be doing an in-store day where I'll be talking to regular shoppers in there and helping them in store to do what I'm hoping my product will be able to do for retailers online. So talk to them about sizing, talk to them about what shapes will suit their body, and in particular, talk to them about how to build a sustainable capsule wardrobe, something that you can actually build on, getting your basics right, but doing it in such a way that it's not overly trend driven or fashion driven. It's to do with getting the right garments for your body shape, your body type, and your size, and building on that, as you go forward, rather than the hit and miss situation of kind of adding something just because it's, something that's in fashion at the moment, but to make 100% sure that it's something that represents your style and that you'll be able to build on it going forward. So that's what's coming up next for me.
Oh, amazing. It's such an exciting time. And you've had this unbelievable career already, Aideen. It's lovely to see you not only supporting the industry, but continuing to grow with the industry, but also using your expertise, this phenomenal amount of knowledge that you've had and you've built over the years to continue to support consumers, who have been incredibly loyal over the years, new consumers, I'm sure, of new brands as well. I know will be interested in this. I think it's such an incredible solution for everyone involved, whether that's the shopper, whether it's the brand or the retailer involved, and of course doing it for the right reason, which is wonderful. So very much looking forward to seeing what the rest of the year has in store for you and this new brand, StylAi. And well done and best of luck with it. So if you've enjoyed today's podcast episode, please like and share it and share Aideen's news of this new brand, StylAi. Remember, of course, you can listen back to previous past Retail Tea Break episodes on your favorite podcast platform or, of course, on YouTube. Do then connect with myself and Aideen on LinkedIn. And obviously, I'm going to pop all the details in the show notes as well. You can find today's show notes and the transcript for today's episode on the retailadvisor.ie. Well, Aideen, best of luck with everything. And thanks so much for today.
Thank you, Melissa. It's been fantastic. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you.